About 2 years ago, I got off of work at around 5 p.m., in which I did every day. I had the same routine: get off of work, then pick up my 4-year-old daughter from daycare. So I'll pick up my daughter, and we head to the grocery store to buy some food for the next few days. After shopping for about 15 minutes, I noticed that there was an older man in every aisle that we've been in, but he didn't have any groceries. After I noticed, we walked past him as we were heading toward the register, and he smiled at me and then waved at my daughter. As I'm taking my groceries out, the cashier asked me, "Is that your husband?" As she's pointing, I look in the direction that she pointed and saw that the man who waved at my daughter is now holding my daughter's hand and walking away with her. I ran to them, pushed him, and grabbed my daughter. I asked what he was doing, and he said she had to use the bathroom and he ran away. I called the police, but he was long gone by the time they got there. Later that night, I made sure my daughter slept in my bed, and in the middle of the night, I woke up to a sound. What is that? I grabbed my phone and turned on my flashlight as I scanned it around the room. To my horror, I saw that man from the grocery store crouched over in the corner of my room. I panicked, fumbled my phone, and I dropped it. I started screaming and grabbing my daughter. I saw the shadow of the man running out of my room, and I heard my house door open as he ran out. I called the police and made a report. Since then, I invested in a security system and a weapon. I'm also weary of people when I'm with my daughter now.
One night in winter of 2018, I was woken up by the sound of whispers. I got up to investigate. I could see outside that it was snowing hard, almost like a blizzard. I called out, "Who's there?" No answer. I went downstairs to investigate further. I then heard footsteps from upstairs, the floorboards creaking. I ran back upstairs to see because the roof has a door that leads to the outside. Stopping to fetch my pistol, I yelled out, "I'm armed," to which I heard a blood-curdling laugh. I turned on the lights to see, but there was no one in sight. I reached the door and opened it to discover a set of footprints on the snow-covered roof. But the prints looked like the person hadn't stepped at full weight. I retreated back into the house and went back downstairs to look for more prints. I could not find more anywhere. Terrified, I called my boss, and he told me, "Oh, that's impossible," but he still came over to investigate. I took him to the roof, but when I opened the door, I was shocked to discover that the footprints had mysteriously disappeared. My boss let out a laugh, thinking he had been the victim of a practical joke. After he had left, I called my dad to talk to him about it, and he explained that during a winter storm is when spirits move about most of the time, night or day, that Wendigos do exist, and they are the keepers of these spirits. When my dad arrived home, he and I walked all around the house to look for more footprints, but there wasn't any to be found. To this day, I make sure to check my roof for footprints before I rest now.
I was a senior in high school, and my science teacher assigned us lab partners. I got paired up with someone who I'll just call DJ for this story. People were laughing at me because DJ was known as a weirdo. I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but DJ was a weirdo. He never really knew how to make conversation, and sometimes he talks to himself. We had to work on a project, but DJ wasn't doing much. He said he was getting anxiety. It was a Friday and our project was never going to be finished on time. Somehow he agreed to come to my house. He couldn't come over directly after school, so I had to wait about 3 hours for him. I was upstairs watching TV and I heard the front door shut. I looked at the clock and it was 4:25 or something. His arrival was a little earlier than I expected. I shouted his name from the top of the stairs, but got no response. I shouted again, no response. So I just assumed that the wind shut the door, so I went back to watching TV. Around 20 minutes later, I got a text from my dad saying that he was working the night shift and couldn't be home. That's how it usually went with him. It was like 5 p.m. when DJ was dropped off at my house. We worked on a project and got food delivered to my house. We were working on the project in my room and it was around 9 p.m. and I was feeling a bit nauseous. I decided to lay down on my bed while DJ was working on the project. I told him I wasn't feeling well and he said that he would just keep working and just have his mom pick him up later. I didn't really feel comfortable with him staying while I was sleeping alone in his house. I was going to tell him, but he was too busy working and I passed out within seconds. I woke up to DJ standing over me, just looking at me. I looked at the clock and it was midnight. I was going to ask him what was he still doing here and what was he doing, but he spoke before me. He said his mom won't answer his calls and he wanted me to take him home. I was pretty annoyed and tried to convince him to just sleep on the couch, but he kept on refusing. I eventually got up and we got into my car and I started driving. When I drove off my street, DJ said something like this: "Gabe, I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm." I lost track of time and I had to go use the bathroom. And when I was walking back into your room, I saw a man crawling under your bed. I think those are the exact words he said. The man didn't notice DJ, and DJ pretended that he didn't see the man. I was scared, and I was getting goosebumps. I kept on asking him if he was telling the truth over and over again. He kept on saying yes. I called the cops, and they went to my house while I dropped off DJ. When I returned, the officer said they couldn't find anything, but they found a knife under my bed and a few stolen valuables. If DJ wasn't at my house that night, then I probably wouldn't be here to tell this horrifying story. And I can't thank DJ enough for possibly saving my life.
This dream stayed with me, and I think it always will. Although not profound or life-altering, I've never been able to shake the memory and the feeling of absolute terror and dread. To give some context, this was a number of years ago. Currently, I'm 23 years old. When this dream occurred, I was around the age of 11. As a child, I suffered from sleep paralysis for a number of years. At first, this terrified me to the point of not wanting to sleep. It became so bad that I pushed myself to states of exhaustion before my body could no longer remain conscious and I'd pass out, only to return to a horrifying imagery of my subconscious. The first time I ever experienced sleep paralysis, I still lived with my aunt, who fostered me, which is another story entirely, but I was in my old room, in my old bunk bed, and I remember it all so clearly. I awake to the sensation of not being able to move, struggle as I may, and this confused but didn't scare me, not yet. It was only when I saw what stood in the corner of my room did the fear really start to descend. It was a hooded figure, all black, so very black, darker than the darkest shade of black imaginable. In his hand was some kind of weapon, like an oddly shaped axe or a scythe. His face was that of a skeleton, ghostly white, dark black holes that felt as though they were sucking in the life straight out of you, where his eyes should be, or would have once been. It stood there staring at me. My eyes widened as I prayed for this to be some kind of dream or hallucination. I was frozen in fear, not that I could escape even if I had the courage to move. Its sharp, crooked, daggered teeth began to form a smile. The most gut-wrenching, heart-stopping smile I could imagine. More than that, the kind of smile that alluded to such confidence, such domination and power over me that only frightened me more and intensified my fear. It slowly, creakily, almost clockwork doll-like began to turn his head, continuing until it was at such an unnatural angle then that it started to inch towards me. It didn't walk. It simply began to move closer. I can't explain it. It's as if it didn't obey any natural law, any flicker of logic. I guess in retrospect, that makes perfect sense, but at the time, it just added to my confusion. It edged ever closer to me, unmoving and unchanging in its deadlocked, icy grin and its gaze of absolute horror still peering into my soul. Looking back, I can picture it, and it disgusts me. It continued until it was halfway across the room. Then, without warning, it just stopped. This was when my blood ran cold. It slowly raised its arm from beneath its cloak to reveal its hideous, revolting arm, a mixture of rotting flesh on bone, decomposing right there in front of me, and the sight of it made me want to throw up. Then it did something I'll never forget. Slowly and methodically, it raised its putrid hand and began to point. Not at random, not at something in my room, but at me. My eyes widened further still, and my heart began to thump in my chest. It then places both hands upon its head and began to pull and twist its head back into place. The noise it made sent shivers down my spine and sent goosebumps and chills all over my body. It cracked and creaked and screamed back into place, and then the figure began to approach me. It was at this point, full-blown panic set in, and I began to struggle. I kicked and twisted and tried to throw my body, but I couldn't. I could not move. I was trapped, paralyzed, as the ominous creature drew ever closer. I tried my best, but I could not break free of my invisible shackles. So I did what any scared person with no other option would do. I screamed. I screamed with all my might. I thought at the very least my family was alerted. Then maybe they could stop it or it would go away. At the very least, they'd surely see what had happened to me, for whatever small, if not any, comfort that would come to them. But to my absolute dismay, no sound came out of my mouth. I tried again, and the same result. Now the figure was almost at the foot of my bed. I continued to cry out for help. In my heart, I was screaming like a madman, but in reality, not a sound could be heard. I looked up, and it's here. A figure is at the foot of my bed. Only now it's not smiling. Now it looked even more terrifying. Its teeth are all aligned jaggedly, and I know it's going to sound stupid, but it looked hungry. Angry and hungry. I continued to struggle, but it was futile. It got closer and closer and closer until it stood right in front of me at the side of my bed. I was frozen. I just looked back at it, petrified. It leaned in until it was face to face with me, and it was at this point I thought my life was over. It reached its arms out toward me, and it screamed, a blood-curdling scream. I tried to close my eyes and prepared myself to be ripped apart by this thing, but no. Nothing. Just like that, it was gone. I looked around my room, my heart thumping so hard I thought that it would escape my ribcage. I was sweating profusely. I was completely afraid. I scanned the room, but it was empty. I turned on the light. Still nothing. I crawled back into bed, confused and fearful. No more sleep was had that night, and the light remained on. The previous night's ordeal haunted me the next day. I couldn't focus. I just wasn't feeling myself. I tried to talk about it with my aunt, but she just put it down as a bad dream, maybe a demon that's taken a liking to me. The latter was her way of being funny, reassuring me that it wasn't real, but I didn't find it comforting in the slightest. In fact, it just made me feel more paranoid. I dreaded going to bed all day, and when night came, I wasn't prepared. I was terrified. I decided I wouldn't sleep in fear of whatever I saw would return. I tried my hardest, but eventually, I began to drift away. I struggled, tried to fight and resist, but alas, was no good. My eyes became heavy and tears began to stream down my face. I couldn't face it. Whatever that thing was, it had shaken me to my very core. It might sound silly, but I genuinely believed when I fell back to sleep that my life would be in serious danger. I sobbed and I cried myself to sleep. The next morning I awoke. I was fine, no figure, no traumatic experience at all, in fact. It filled me with such joy, and more joy than I ever thought that I had felt before, or since. Maybe it'd just been a dream. Maybe I didn't have to face this thing. I was exhilarated. Later on, I would learn about sleep paralysis, as I did end up suffering from it quite a few years, and ended up doing some research which confirmed it all to be nothing more than sleep-related hallucinations. In fact, after a while, the images of demonic figures and ghostly shadows lost all power over me. It became more annoying than scary. Even when they would return several times as I returned to sleep, eventually I did discover something useful. Something to help you escape from this hallucination, even if just temporarily. Trick is to move. I know you're probably thinking, well, that's useful, considering you're legitimately paralyzed, hence the name sleep paralysis. But there's something many people fail to consider. Yeah, it's true, you can't move your arms or legs, or even your head. You can't scream, make a sound. What you can do is move your tongue. Sounds silly, but move your tongue as much as possible, as quickly as possible. If you can try to waggle those fingertips and toes at the same time, I promise you'll wake up much, much faster. Maybe there's somebody who's hearing this who suffered from sleep paralysis. Maybe there's people listening who already know this or don't believe it would work. But if you're suffering, and the once tranquil thought of sleep has been replaced with the fear of what awaits you, give it a try. It may just help.
My girlfriend and I had driven down a dirt road, an old dirt road, that ran beside a lake on one side, with mountains on the other. We were looking for unexplored territory to hike in. The dirt road became a trail and eventually was swallowed up entirely by the forest. Once the path became impassable by the car, we got out and hiked for quite some time and began making our way back to the car as the sun was going down. It was a challenge getting the car turned around, but I finally managed and we were off. It was slow going as it was a crappy road and getting dark fast. Suddenly we came to a fork in the path that hadn't been visible coming the other way. Neither of us had any idea whether to go right or left, so I just picked randomly, hoping that both would end up taking us back to the main road. As we rounded a small curve in the road, our headlights fell upon a man dragging a large hockey duffel bag off the trail into the woods. As soon as the lights hit him, he just froze completely. Driving past him felt like an eternity because we couldn't have been going more than 5 miles an hour due to the crappy roads. My girlfriend and I didn't say a word to each other until we were well past this guy, at which point we were like, what the hell was that? And then the road just ended. Just like where we had stopped the first time, the forest had swallowed up this part of the road. We were going to have to turn around and drive by the man with the human-sized duffel bag again. I told my girlfriend to buckle up and hold on tight because at the first sign of trouble, I was gunning it. We came to the spot where the man was, and he was nowhere to be seen. We eventually made it to the right path and got the hell out of there. The weirdest thing about it was, there wasn't a vehicle anywhere near this guy for 50 miles in either direction. We would have seen it if there had been. We traveled as far as possible both ways, and there just wasn't a place to pull off on the road. How the hell did he get there? Where was he going? And what was in the bag?
I'm a 14-year-old girl from Ireland. A few months ago, before my family moved houses, we lived in kind of a bad neighborhood where a lot of crime took place. One day I traveled by train to get to my cousin's house, as the journey would be too long on foot and I had to be there at a certain time. I scanned my ticket, sat down, and began reading a book I had brought with me. From somewhere nearby, I heard these strange sobbing sounds and someone panting as though they were having an anxiety attack. I tried ignoring it, but it just got worse. Eventually, I looked up and saw a young woman who looked to be in her early to late 20s, crying with her head in her hands. I immediately got up and asked if she was alright. She then sat up and looked at me. I remember the petrified look on her face, and her eyes being full of tears, and she was shaking. I was also wondering why the hell everyone else on the train was just sitting there, because apart from the passengers with headphones in their ears, they could all hear her. She never answered me. After we locked eyes, she abruptly sprinted to another seat, about 2 rows up from where she was before. She began staring at the ground, with her long hair falling over her shoulders and face. I was worried that I had upset her even more, and assumed that she wanted to be left alone. Whatever was wrong with her was private. So I sat back down and tried reading again, but I couldn't take my mind off of what just happened. It honestly made me shiver to the point where I became paranoid for the rest of the ride. After the next 2 stops, I looked around, since I didn't hear any more crying. She was gone, and I assumed that she had gotten off. The next stop was mine. As I was walking to my cousin's house, I kept thinking about the woman I had encountered, wishing that I had acted differently. The next day, after I got back home, I was scrolling through my news feed when I came across an article about a 32-year-old journalist named Jennifer, who had been found dead and mutilated just 2 streets away from the train station. I saw a picture, and I almost dropped my phone as my heart stopped. It was her. I recognized her face and hair. There was also a graphic censored image of her body. According to the story, her body was found gutted and soaked in blood, with her clothes torn to shreds. Her innards were strewn about her dismembered corpse, and she looked as though she had been dead for a while. This made me sick. I wish I had never clicked on that story. Later that night, I saw many more bigger news networks covering it. Last I heard, they never found out who did it, but apparently she had been sexually assaulted before being killed. An anonymous witness later told the police that he had seen her crying on the train. I felt extremely sorry for this poor girl, for the horrific accounts of agony she must have gone through. She must have had some idea what was going to happen to her, for her to be crying like that. It still shakes me to my core thinking back on this. I told my mother, and she reported what I saw to the police. She never wanted me to take the train again after that. My cousin told me that before anyone else arrived at her house the night I came over, she had seen a suspicious-looking man in what looked to be jeans and a black hoodie slowly walking past their house. She didn't see his face and didn't think much of it at the time. After she found out what happened, she became traumatized and didn't go out for weeks afterwards, not even to go to school. I hope that woman rests in peace and that her family finds justice. I'll never look or think of a train in the same way again.
This happened about 6 years ago in the early hours of my 20th birthday. At the time, I had been working as a carpet cleaner. It's also important to note that I am a 6-foot male, and at the time, weighed about 210 pounds. By nature, I'm an extremely cautious individual. Also, in the particular area that I worked in, there was a lot of gang activity at the time. It was about 6 p.m. when I got a call from one of the head carpet cleaning techs. He explained that he couldn't do the late job he was scheduled for, which was at 11 p.m., because his pregnant wife might have been going into labor, and he had to get to the hospital. Seeing as I was broke, I told him I would cover for him. It wasn't until around 2 a.m. that me and my partner got finished with the job. We made it back to our shop at around 2:15 a.m., got the truck ready for the other guys who would be taking it out in a few hours, and headed home around 2:45 a.m. I worked for nearly 20 hours straight at this point and had a 45-minute drive home. I lived out in the middle of nowhere. Being exhausted and barely able to keep my eyes open, I decided to stop at a gas station and grab an energy drink. When I pulled in, I noticed a black Buick sitting in the far corner of the gas station parking lot. I didn't think much of it. Perhaps it was the attendant's car. I went in, got my drink, and left. After about 5 minutes of being back on the road, I had a gut feeling that something was wrong. and began to check behind me to see if someone was telling me. I saw a pair of headlights in the distance gaining on me fast. Deciding that I needed to confirm my suspicion before taking any drastic measures, I continued my drive home while keeping an eye on the headlights in the rearview mirror. I was about 2 miles from home and still being tailed by the headlights. That's when I decided to take a detour. After about 10 minutes of maneuvering on back roads, I knew that things were getting serious as the headlights followed me every which way. My little 4-cylinder Saturn was slow to get away. Now fearing for my life, I knew I had to try to take control of the situation, as well as keep from leading my pursuers to my home, where my sister and her 2-month-old son were staying at the time. At the next stop sign, I put my car in park, placed my 12-inch military-grade knife up my jacket sleeve, and grabbed a pistol I keep in my car for protection. I prayed I would not have to use them, and then stepped out of the car. As I did, the car that had been following me came to a screeching halt, and 4 men exited the vehicle. It was then that I recognized it was the same black Buick from the gas station. As the men climbed out, the moonlight revealed that one of them was carrying a large chain, and the others were armed with a baseball bat, a tire iron, and the one who I assumed was their leader had an axe. Seeing this, and making sure to keep my pistol out of the light, I asked, "Is there a problem?" One of the men responded, "You about to die, boy." It was at this moment that I realized this was some kind of gang initiation. I dropped the knife from my sleeve, gripping it in my left hand, while backing behind my open car door, trying to at least limit the direction they could attack me from. Seeing the knife and my attempt to put something between me and them, they laughed. And one said to the others, "This motherfucker think he's gonna beat us with a little knife." As they approached, I pulled the gun out and fired a warning shot at the leader's feet. The hardcore badasses quickly turned into little scared rabbits and were now hightailing it out of there. I yelled after them, "You idiots picked the wrong guy to mess with. Now get the hell out of here before I put a bullet in your ass." They all fumbled back into the car and hauled ass. As they sped away, I was able to get the plate number and called the police. After getting off the phone with the dispatcher, I got back into my car. I made it home around 4 a.m. and passed out. When I woke up a few hours later, I called the police station to see if they had any leads. It turns out that the car was stolen, and they were unable to locate it. As far as I know, the car has never been found, and the 4 hoodlums were never caught.
Hi, I'm Jacob. This is an actual true gym story that almost kind of killed my mentality. Usually around 8:25, I arrive at the gym, and the first thing I do is pull-ups and chin-ups. I always love doing those. While I'm in the gym at the time, my girlfriend would usually chill at home and watch Housewives and wait for me to come home. Unfortunately, that didn't happen on this day. So I was lifting weights, not really doing anything, as there's really nothing to do. A man came up to me. He looked way older than me. At the time I was 23, now I'm 30. But he looked innocent. He didn't look like some mad dude that looked like he was about to dispatch you. He looked like a cool guy. He was pretty short, with short black hair, brown eyes. Not gonna lie, I think my girlfriend would have dumped me for him. But anyways, I asked the guy, "Can you help, sir?" Then I remember him saying, "Hey, I lost my phone, and I was wondering if I can borrow yours to call someone." I was kind of a smart ass back then, and decided to ask, "Okay, but mind giving me your first name and second name, so I can assure the help you need?" Even though you don't need the first and second name to dial someone, but I pretended he needed to. So he gave me his ID card. His name was Liam Ruffler. He looked way younger in the picture, but that didn't bother me. I compared his ID to his face, and it looked exactly like him. I noted his first and second name on my notepad, which I always bring around. I asked him, "Do you have a car, sir?" His face looked suspicious, his eyebrows lowered in confusion, almost like he knew what I was doing. But just to make sure I didn't give away my plan on having his details just in case something went bad, I immediately gave him my phone. "Thank you," he said. A few minutes later, he was still on the phone while I was lifting weights. I didn't ask him what he was doing though. I had to make sure not to panic. His eyes wide open, and he smiled at my phone. His smile almost looked like a villain's smirk. Something told me to immediately get my phone back, but for some reason I couldn't. I just kept lifting my weights. But I did say, "Excuse me, sir? It's been a few minutes since you had my phone. Can I get it back now?" There was a long silence. He didn't even look at me once though. He just kept looking at my phone, kind of observing the screen. So it was time to get up. "Excuse me, sir. May I have my phone back now, please?" He finally looked at me. He looked kind of sad that I said that. So he gave me back my phone, and I was still confused on why he was smirking and observing it. I didn't think too much about it though. It was around 1 a.m. in the morning, and I watched TV while my girlfriend was sleeping. My eyes were about to close, but I tried my best not to fall asleep. I completely forgot about what happened in the gym. Minutes later, I got a ping on my phone. It was a message from an unknown number, so I opened it. I was dazed and confused at the text message. It said, "Hey, Mr. Gym Worker." I messaged back, "Who's this?" There was a long silence until I put my phone down to watch TV. My phone pinged again. It was the same guy saying, "I met you at the gym, remember? You let me borrow your phone?" His text didn't seem that scary. I just wondered how he got my number. "How did you get my number though?" I asked. He replied quickly, but with an audio message. "I only wanted to dial you," with a villainous laugh. His voice scared the soul out of me. "Please delete my number, otherwise I'll call the police," I text. I put my phone down, not able to watch TV anymore. An hour later, and I was getting ready for bed. I turned off the TV and went into my bedroom. I saw that my girlfriend was still sleeping, and I fell asleep too. I woke up to the sound of my phone pinging. I checked the time and it was around 4 a.m. in the morning. I miserably grabbed my phone, eyes squinting at the bright screen. It was an unknown number again, texting saying, "Hey, I want to show you something cool." I was pissed off at this point and just put my phone down and ignored it. There was a brief silence, then my phone pinged again, but I ignored it. After a while, my phone started to ring. I definitely was woken up by that. To shut him up, I answered the phone. "Sir, can you please stop calling me? Otherwise I'll block you," I said. And with a firm voice he said, "Your house looks nice. I wonder who that girl on your bed is." My heart sank. It skipped several beats. I looked at my girlfriend. My eyes were wide open. "What does the girl look like?" I said. My voice began to tremble. He said, "I like the pink bed there." I froze. I was anxious and scared when I looked at the bed and found out it was pink. I started screaming on the phone, "Get out of my house, otherwise I'll call 911. He literally just ignored me and said, "Your living room looks lovely here." My eyes on my body shaking, but the angry side got over me. I rushed downstairs, my fist out, ready to take the guy down. I started screaming, "Where are you?" My angry side took over my whole body and made me confident to fight. I started searching around quickly. I heard footsteps running upstairs where my room is. I stopped, turned around, and saw a shadow sprinting up the stairs. I started sprinting with anger. I saw him standing near my bedroom door where my girlfriend is. "Get out of my house!" There was a short silence. We just stared at each other. He slowly started touching the door handle to my bedroom and opened it. I wasn't having it. I screamed and punched him with all my strength. I don't remember exactly where I punched him, but I know I got him because he dropped to the ground. I dialed 911 and explained to them what happened. A short while later, the police arrived. They searched the man and found his ID that I had asked him to give me at the gym. My girlfriend walked out of the room and asked me why there was so much noise. Of course, I explained everything. My girlfriend would have been dead and not here with me right now if the man got into the bedroom. But the man was now on the ground, completely knocked out. That taught me a lesson, but then again, it cut down all my trust I have in strangers. Never again will I see his face. His face now belongs behind bars.